Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee, and I apologize for the time consuming of these bills. So appreciate your indulgence in presenting these bills. This particular
Leader Gant,
bill,
I'm going to give you a motion, and I'm looking for a second.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You're recognized, sir.
Thank you. This piece of legislation increases the penalty of obstructing a highway or other passageway to a Class E felony and a mandatory fine of $3,000. Under present law, a violation of subdivision A1 under 39-17-307 is a Class A misdemeanor, and a violation of subdivision A2 is a Class C misdemeanor. If the violation of subdivision A1 obstructs an emergency vehicle, then it is increased to a Class E felony. Secondly, it creates criminal immunity from prosecution for any drivers who are exercising, and let me stress, due caution, who unintentionally cause injury or death to a person illegally obstructing a roadway. Section 3 creates a Class A misdemeanor for a person who throws an object at another with the intent of harming the other person while participating in a riot. Section 4 creates a Class E felony for a person who throws an object at another and causes bodily injury while participating in a riot. With that, Mr. Chairman, I give it back to you, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Leader Gant, for that explanation. Members, you've heard the explanation of the bill, House Bill 513. Any questions? Representative Dixie, you're recognized.
I have a few questions. One is, how do we determine what's a riot and what's a protest?
Leader Gant.
It is defined in the actual language of the bill.
What does it say?
Representative Dixie, you're recognized.
Would you mind reading it?
I will defer to legal to read that.
Representative Dixie, are you requesting that we go out of session to hear from legal what the definition of rioting is?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Without objection, we're out of session. And now I would recognize Michelle Fogarty from Legal Services.
Michelle Fogarty. Under 39-17-301, riot means a disturbance in a public place or a penal institution involving an assemblage of 3 or more persons, whether or not participating in any otherwise lawful activity, which by tumultuous and violent conduct creates grave danger of substantial damage to property or serious bodily injury to persons, or substantially obstructs law enforcement or other governmental functions. That's the definition of a riot.
Thank you, Ms. Fogarty. Representative Dixie, do you have any further questions for legal while we're out of session?
No, not for legal.
Okay. Then we will go back into session pending. Representative Hardaway, are you wishing to be recognized for a question for legal?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you're recognized.
Thank you. Is there guilt by association, I guess is the way I'm going to use it in layman's terms. Can you be standing there, a part of it, don't do anything, but you did show up with everyone else? Is that going to make you part of the riot?
Are you asking if you can get a little bit of riot on you?
Yes, sir. Is that riot, can you be tainted with the riot?
Understood. Ms. Fogarty?
Under the current statute 39-17-302, a person commits an offense who knowingly participates in a riot, and then participates is further defined as including joining a group of 3 or more persons who riot, aiding or abetting a riot, or refusing any lawful order of correctional personnel or other law enforcement officers during the course of a riot.
And Representative Hardaway, I did make a joke earlier, but the reason I made that joke is because I'd like to take this opportunity to point out that we actually cleaned this up during our special session last summer, where I felt like, and there were enough members of this General Assembly who agreed with me that we passed this law, that we needed to tighten the definition of rioter so that we didn't inadvertently pull in peaceful protesters or other people who were not participating in a riot. So I was being a bit funny before, but it was because we actually just changed that, and my memory triggered that, we were very, very careful to make sure that we had a laser focus on that definition of rioting so that we didn't pull people into that definition who didn't need to be. But if you have any further questions.
Yes, sir, but the two elements that were tightened, was it the intent and the participation?
Ms. Fogarty?
I'm sorry, could you
Actually, that was to you, Mr. Chairman.
The answer is yes.
All right, thank you. Thank you, counsel.
Representative Beck, you're recognized for a question for Ms. Fogarty.
Yes, what was it? Would you read to us the definition of a protest, please?
Ms. Fogarty, I will buy you some time and restate the question.
Again, I believe Chairman Dixie was, had mentioned the definition of a protest also. Is there a definition of a protest legal?
I do not believe there's a definition of protest in our statute.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Representative Lamar, do you have a question for Legal Services? You're recognized, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my question is, there's a definition for riot, but we can't classify protesting. So how, if someone gets in trouble for what they say is protesting, how do you classify the two to say they were protesting or they were rioting if we only have a definition of one? And or what I'm trying to say, could someone, a prosecutor, label someone as a rioter because there's a definition, but they don't have the ability to label them under protesting because there's not one? Do you see what I'm trying to ask you?
And I'll jump in just to say briefly that protesting is not a crime, so that you wouldn't have a prosecutor trying to define someone as a protester, that the prosecutor would not need to go through that process because protesting itself is not a crime. So, and I'll let Ms. Fogarty jump in as well, but that's why we have a definition for rioter, because being a rioter, actually participating in a riot, is a crime. So we don't need a definition for a prosecutor to use for something that's not a crime. But Ms. Fogarty, if you want to put a finer point on that.
I would just say there is no offense of protesting. So there is an offense of rioting, and there are certain elements to that offense. So if the facts of whatever case meet those elements, then it would be within the prosecutor's discretion to charge someone with rioting. But there is no offense of protesting. It's not against the law to protest.
You're recognized.
My question for you is, so under this bill, in your legal opinion, someone could be, even if it's a riot or not, someone technically can be immune from getting in trouble for hitting somebody?
Ms. Fogarty?
Section 2 of the bill states that a person operating a motor vehicle who is exercising due care and unintentionally causes injury or death to another person who is violating subsection A, which it would be the rioting subsection, is immune from prosecution for the injury or death. That's the language in the bill.
And thank you, Representative Lamar. And I think that's very important because we certainly want to be intentional here that we're talking about a person, in that section specifically, a person operating a motor vehicle who is exercising due care. So this is not a license to intentionally run someone over. And I want to be clear about that as well. But thank you for asking the question. Any other questions for Legal Services? Seeing none, we'll go back. Representative Hardaway, I'm sorry, I saw your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I didn't have it until you gave your explanation.
Shame on me for jamming in.
Yeah, so if you're defending yourself or you're trying to avoid bodily harm, and you're intentionally driving through or over protesters, help me with that scenario, Mr. Chairman.
If you're exercising due care and you unintentionally cause injury or death. So again, that sounds like it's an accident.
All right, thank you.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
We're going to go back into session. We're back into session. And next on my list, I have Representative Griffey, and then I have several others on the list as well. You're on the list. Representative Griffey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee, I wish I had a nickel for every time I had a case and you had a bar fight or, a fight or something. Someone's trying to say, well, I wasn't really involved with that. I was doing this and that. Those are questions that are typically left for the investigators and the jury to even determine. but we don't prosecute folks for engaging in innocent behavior or just even standing and watching. But you have to do some sort of act or engage in some sort of specific act before you're going to be prosecuted, technically under the law. So, and those decisions are up to the jury system, and that's why we do things, criminal justice in Tennessee. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Next on my list, I have Representative Dixie. You're recognized.
Well, that was a quick come around.
You were next on the list, sir.
Okay, thank you. I'm a little concerned about these laws, and I think that they're very punitive, and they seem like there's retribution for someone that's actually just trying to explain. And these bills could actually hurt some of our young people. They're making them felonies, and under this bill, throwing a water bottle at a police officer could get you a felony, which would could inhibit your, when you're 30 and you're ready to get a job, or in 25 get a job. So I'm just cautioning you. I just don't feel like this bill is overkill, and it's very harmful and it's dampening the voices of our people who want to express the displeasure of what's going on in our daily lives. And they want to make a point because they feel like we, as legislators, aren't listening to them. And I just caution this committee, before we make it a felony for throwing a water bottle, maybe even a rock, to make this a felony. I think that's to the extreme. And if it comes to the immunity or running over protesters, I think it's going to be hard to prove the intent of someone hitting someone. It could be a protest going on downtown. Someone's like, hey, I'm gonna go down there and see what's going on. And if somebody gets in my way, then I have the right to run them over. And I think that's how people are going to interpret this bill. I don't know, it may not be your intent, which I don't think it is, but there will be actors that will come up and they will use this as a defense. So I wish you would roll the bill. Maybe we can talk about it a little bit. But I just cannot support this bill at this moment. I think it's overkill.
Thank you, Representative Dixie. And I want to clarify, too, on the record that throwing a water bottle is not made a felony by this legislation. Just to be clear, I don't want to get too fast and loose with the facts. But it would be throwing an object while you are rioting, just to make sure that we're clear about that. Representative Dixie, I can get you back on the list if you like.
Oh, I was just going to respond to your comment.
Okay, you're recognized.
Okay. Well, and as we used in the example before that Representative Hardaway said that, like you said, you get a little riot on you if you're standing by somebody, and it could happen, and someone's just in the
Representative Dixie, I'm sorry to interrupt you there. I want to be clear. We have a very, very tight definition of rioting so that you can't do that, and I think Representative that asked the questioning before was satisfied from legal that we have, in fact, tightened that definition a fair amount. So,
yeah.
Thank you, sir. Next on my list, I have Representative Halsey. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wondered if I'm reading this right, obstructing a highway or a waterway or a sidewalk, it's not that the demonstration or riot is not tied to that. This could be anybody. This could be one person blocking a driveway, and that this bill applies to them. Is that correct? Or is it tied to a group of people in a demonstration or a riot?
Leader Gant, you're recognized.
Yeah, it's specifically surrounding a riot.
Okay.
Leader Gant, I think we just need to clarify that one bit. Just want to make sure we get this clear on the record. I believe as your bill is drafted, obstructing a highway would not be tied to the riot itself.
Well, I guess I didn't understand his question.
Okay.
Would you re-clarify your...
Representative Halsey, you're recognized.
Thank you. Yeah, that was the question. If one person or two persons block my driveway, for example, does this bill apply to that and bump that to a Class E felony, or is it tied to a demonstration or riot when you block a highway?
Well, let me just read what's in the actual legislation. It increases the penalty of obstructing a highway or other passageway to a Class E felony and a mandatory fine of $3,000. Under present law, a violation of subdivision A1 under 39-17-307 is a Class A misdemeanor, and a violation of subdivision A2 is a Class C misdemeanor. If the violation of subdivision A1 obstructs an emergency vehicle, then it is increased to a Class E felony. Is that the part you're talking about? I guess I'm...
Representative Halsey, you recognize?
No, my question was, does the obstruction of a highway or a waterway or a sidewalk have to be married up with a demonstration or a riot, or can it be one person or two people that block a highway or a sidewalk, that this bill would apply to them too?
Okay. Well, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to go back to legal to officially answer that correctly.
Absolutely. I was just about to suggest, I think a reading of the definition, I think, would be at hand here. So we're going to go out of session and recognize Michelle Fogarty from Legal Services. You recognize, ma'am.
Thank you. The offense of obstructing a highway or a passageway is in our statute as a person commits an offense who, without legal privilege, intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly obstructs a highway, street, sidewalk, railway, waterway, elevator, aisle, or hallway to which the public or a substantial portion of the public has access, or any other place used for the passage of persons, vehicles, or conveyances, whether the obstruction arises from the person's acts alone or from the person's acts and the acts of others, or disobeys a reasonable request or order to move issued by a person known to be a law enforcement officer, a firefighter, or a person with authority to control the use of the premises to prevent obstruction of a highway or passageway, or to maintain public safety by dispersing those gathered in dangerous proximity to a fire, a riot, or other hazard.
And so I want to clarify there too. I'm sure the representative was just given an example, but the example of a driveway was used. That would not be included in that definition, to be clear. Any other questions for Legal Services while we're out of session? Seeing none. Representative Halsey, did you have any further questions? Chairman Halsey? Thank you, sir. Next on my list, I have Representative Lamar. Representative Lamar, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am just curious, why did you bring this a bill? What made you bring this bill?
Leader
Well,
Gant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This, in my opinion, brings or lets Tennessee be known as, if Tennessee is going to be targeted, this creates a deterrent that sends a strong message that, in Tennessee, we're not going to tolerate this type of activity.
Representative Lamar.
What do you mean by if Tennessee is going to be a target? What do you mean by that?
If you have groups outside in Tennessee or outside of Tennessee, this sends a strong message that this is what our laws are going to honor when it comes to these situations.
Representative Lamar.
Thank you. So, for example, what if there's a protest outside the Capitol and agitators come and startups and stuff, and people start fighting in the streets or something, and particularly in front of the garage? Would this bill allow someone who's trying to get home to be able to be immune if they hit someone coming out?
Well,
Leader Gant, you recognized.
Yeah, I think the bill clearly states the intent there.
Representative Lamar.
So they would be immune from prosecution if they hit someone on their way out the garage.
Mr. Chairman, correct me if I'm wrong, but that would be up to the judge to decide that.
Well, yeah, certainly your bill states that they are exercising due care.
caution. Yeah.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Lamar. Seeing no other questions, we're ready to vote. All those in favor of sending House Bill 513 to Finance, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. Sir, you head to Finance. Thank you very much.